tried this out today, but I didn't use the mic, so I don't know if this is going to actually work or not. Will you use another mic, maybe?
Your dance, I think, is loose, yeah.
All right, this is a 2014 report of our total activity. The Uniform Crime Reports, which is required by the state and the FBI, in my opinion, does not give us a total picture of what your police department does. When I started, I wanted to include all the activity, and this is what I came up with. I'm going to do an overall summary first. In 2014, we traveled or patrolled a total of 58,168 miles. Our gasoline expenses for that was $15,504. We wrote 442 reports. We made 445 traffic stops, and out of that, we wrote 150 tickets. The fines we collected from those 150 tickets to the city was $3,676. Total number of calls or field incidents that we responded to totaled up to 1,986. In 2014, we physically arrested 60 people. That's people we took into custody and we processed the complaint. 15 were felony offenders, 45 were misdemeanor offenders. We had 40 traffic crashes, and out of that we wrote only 27 reports. The rest of them were handled between the parties involved. The revenue from the insurance companies only was $22. We had 61 individual training sessions and 6 court appearances. And this is how it broke down. There were 54 alarm calls. There were 46 animal control or problem cases. 18 were stray dog or animal complaints. 2 were missing dog cases, either lost or stolen. We had 4 dog bite reports. We had 1 case of a dog killing a cat. I had 3 animal neglect cases this year. We had 5 separate bear calls, and that's bears in the backyard. And we had 5 separate crashes with bears, cars or vehicles crashing into bears, and 1 with a deer. There were 7 other wildlife calls, mostly snakes and alligators. We had no misdemeanor assault cases this year. Assist EMS calls, as we're assisting the ambulance, we did that 51 times. Assist other agencies, there were 269. The lion's share of that is with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. 198 times we assisted them. We have a good working relationship with them. FHP 33 times, and that's mostly the bad accidents that happen outside the city of Carrabelle, and we're usually the first ones on the scene on this end of the county. FWC 14 times. A lot of times we have to transport their prisoners because they don't have vehicles with cages in them. State Fire Marshal 1 time, DCF 8, DOC 5, other agencies 10. That includes like Wakulla County Sheriff's Department, those agencies. Baker Act cases, we had 9. We filed 7 of the petitions, the hospital filed 2. We had 11 misdemeanor battery cases last year. We had 19 burglaries, 10 residential, 4 commercial, 1 utility building, and 4 attempted burglaries. Child abuse, none. Child neglect cases, 3. Citizen assist cases, total 224. Check the well-being or 911 hang-up calls were 36. We escorted people 13 times. There were 25 vehicle breakdowns. 5 times senior citizens fell down and couldn't get up. 112 times we gave reports, directions, or information to people. We had to verify 1 VIN last year, and we had to verify 1 person out of state for parole purposes here in Carrabelle. We had 29 intoxicated pedestrian calls where we had to help drunks up off the street. These are people not driving, just falling down. Civil cases requiring police help, there were 45. 29 of them were property disputes. We served subpoenas 3 times. We had 13 landlord-tenant disputes. Traffic crashes, like I said, we had 40. We took 22 reports. 13 were handled without reports, where the people took care of it themselves. 5 of them were hit and run. 30 criminal mischief cases. First degree, there were 11. Second degree, there were 16. Felony, there were 3. We had 4 death investigations this year. The domestic disturbances are always our biggest problem and always will be our biggest problem. We responded to 136 domestic disturbance calls this year. 67 of them were verbal. 19 involved domestic batteries. 1 was an aggravated domestic battery. We had no criminal sexual assaults that were domestic related this year. We had 2 criminal mischiefs that were domestic related. We had 2 threat reports, 10 harassment reports that were domestic related. We had 8 child exchanges we had to stand by for. 1 violation of a domestic court order case. 1 violation of a domestic violence injunction case. We escorted people 22 times during domestic disturbances. And we had 1 traffic crash during the domestic disturbance. And I had 1 out-of-state domestic child custody problem I had to deal with. Drug cases, arrest 3. DUI cases, we had 18. 1 of them was a felony. It was the 4th DUI that he had. He had 3 previous convictions before, so he was prosecuted as a felony DUI offender. Emotionally disturbed persons calls, these are cases where a Baker Act petition is not filed, where the person is not taken to a mental health facility. We had 7 of those calls. Elderly abuse or neglect cases, it was a neglect case, we had 1. FCIC, NCI entries, that's where I have to enter things into the computer. We had 7 of those. I have to file a petition, we have to take them to the, we have to file an affidavit complaint, take it to the Sheriff's Department. Field interviews, Terry stops, we only had 2. Physical fight and disturbance calls, we had 25. And we had 11 separate calls of unruly customers or disorderly conduct calls that did not involve physical fighting. Those are usually in businesses. Fires or arsons, there were 27. We had 4 house structure fires this year, 1 fatality. We had 3 arsons. They were to garbage cans or piles of garbage. They did not involve any structures. There were 10 smoke reports, 1 natural gas leak, and we had 8 brush fires we responded to along with the fire department. Forced entries, these are cases where I have to force entry to a home, knock down the door. There usually are cases where people have fallen down and can't get up, or we get a check to well-being call. I had 2 of those this year. Forgery cases, nuns, fraud, scams, counterfeit money cases. We had 12 fraud cases this year. 16 grand thefts, 14 of them were property, 2 of them were vehicles or vessels. Harassment cases, no witness tampering, but we had 16 harassment reports we took this year. Homeless people calls, we had 7. Evidence or contraband recovery calls, there were 13. We recovered stolen property 6 times, contraband 4 times. 1 time we checked to determine if property was stolen, and we had 2 prison contraband smuggling cases this year. Lost and found property calls, we had 27, and we found owners for the property 10 times and returned it. Identity theft cases 5, illegal dumping cases, and this is from vehicles, we had 4. Information from police calls 68. Investigations or follow-ups, this takes a lot of time. We do follow-ups every day. Sometimes there were 207 of those. 45 juvenile cases or calls. 5 times we took juveniles into custody. 3 juvenile felons were arrested this year. Lockouts, we had 94 this year. 1 involved a child locked in the car. 2 involved pets locked in the car. Marchman Act reports, 1 misdemeanor traffic calls or arrest, we had 5 suspended DL arrests. We had actually 5 pursuits, which resulted in 4 in custody arrests. And the rest were reckless driving complaints or DUI calls that come in from out of town as they're coming into Carrabelle. They're be on the lookout type things for a reckless driver or a DUI driver. We had 56 of those. Sometimes we find them, sometimes we don't. Missing person cases, we had 5, 1 adult, 4 juveniles. We found everybody. Natural disasters, we had 3 severe storms. We had 1 tornado out on St. Teresa on the midnight shift, what our officers responded to. The rest of the stuff was none. Man-made disasters, we had 1 plane crash this year out near Apalachicola. I was at the state's attorney's office in Apalachicola, so I was close. I was one of the first officers on the scene. I also had the equipment to go out there because he landed in a salt marsh out there in the Gulf. So I had to get on a boat, and I had photographic equipment to take pictures for the FAA that they needed next week. Pretty good pilot, actually. He was able to put his plane down when he lost power coming out of the Apalachicola airport. We had no plane crashes at Carrabelle this year. Man-made disasters, like when we had the BP, Deep Horizon disaster, there were none of those. 50 no trespass agreement calls. We issued 42 no trespass agreements this year. We vacated 2 of them at the person's request. Quality of life complaints, there were 60. Nuisance complaints were 3. Loud noise or disturbance complaints, 15. Garbage complaints, 5. Ordinance violations, 16. Illegally parked or abandoned vehicles, 21. Petty theft cases were 33. First degree misdemeanor from 100 to 300 were 20. Second degree less than $100 were 13. We had 4 prowler calls. We had no search and rescue operations this year, or last year, I mean. Service calls, we had 159. We removed traffic hazards from the road 14 times. We assisted a citizen in getting fingerprinted for legal purposes once. Notifications to citizens were made 4 times. Building checks or open doors were 140. That's mostly on the night shift, where officers are either getting a call to an open door or they're physically checking doors and pulling on doors. Suspicious circumstances or person calls, we had 41. Threat cases, reports, we had 21. We towed 1 vehicle. Like I said before, we made 445 traffic stops, 150 tickets. We directed traffic control 12 times. We had 1 bad check case, and restitution was made, so the person didn't want to prosecute. The violent crimes is low. This year we had 1 aggravated assault. We had 4 aggravated batteries. We had 1 lewd and lascivious sexual molestation. We had 1 resisting officer with violence complaint. We had 7 resisting officers without violence. Warrants from other agencies, we served 10 of those. Warrants from the Carrabelle Police Department, we served 9 of those. Out of 12 arrest warrants that we applied for, 9 were approved. The other 3, just the way the cookie crumbles, they weren't good cases. I knew they weren't going to be approved, but we have to do our job. We have to submit it to the state's attorney's office. It becomes his decision if he's going to prosecute or not. We had no search warrants last year. I had no weapons violation cases. I had 3 separate shots fired calls that we responded to. Critical incidents, there were 2. I serve on the Franklin County SWAT team. There was a hostage situation call out in Apalachicola. It turned out to be unfounded, but we still had to go in and search the house. The other one involved a barricaded armed female senior citizen who has dementia, who was armed with a handgun, who was pointing it at first the EMS people, then our officers, and then all the other officers that came. Basically, I went behind her with a ballistic shield and wrestled the gun out of her hand. The rest of them were all zeros. Officers' use of force. Well, let's go back to special events. We had 15. Most of these are the things we do every year. They're the festivals and stuff that we're used to. The one event that was not annually repeated was the Golf Unmanned Systems grand opening, which we helped with all the traffic control. We did go out to the Seafood Festival, but that was a paid detail by the festival. It wasn't on city time. They asked us to contribute an officer. The rest of the stuff is all the stuff that's usually there. We didn't have anything at the airport with the Carrabelle Speed Festival last year. Officer use of force incidents, we had 10. Empty hand control, there were 4. This is come-alongs, pressure points, there were 4 of those. Hard empty hand controls, those are punches. We had none of those. OC spray, none. Impact weapons or tasers, none. Beanbag less lethal, I displayed it one time. And the beanbag weapon is a dedicated shotgun. Best way to show it is I'll show you a picture. That's it there. It's got orange stock and forend because it is a dedicated weapon. That way, no lethal rounds will ever be loaded in that gun. Only beanbag rounds. The beanbag round looks like that. From a distance of about 40 to 50 feet away, I can fire this. It gets me farther away than what I can do with a taser, which gives me more safety. It does pert. It can kill people, but most of the time it doesn't. It's a good tool to have. We had a person high on meth that was supposedly suicidal, that was armed with a knife on a porch that we got into a standoff with. We've got one officer covering with lethal fire. I pull out the beanbag gun. It gives me another option. He saw what was about to happen. He threw the knife down. Officers displayed firearm but did not point it at the offender. This is when the officer's got his gun out at the low ready. That happened twice last year. Officer pointed the firearm at the offender 3 times that happened. We shot no one. We killed no one. No one killed us. One time, an officer discharged the firearm. That was me. I killed a coyote that was full of mange, possibly sick, that was hanging around Tilly Miller Park. We had numerous calls. I had to do it. These are all the other things that we do during the year. A lot of this stuff is administrative. This is a lot of the stuff that I do that my Deputy Chief Gary Huntings will be taking over this year. But it just shows you that all the things that we have to do during any given year. Funeral escorts, FEMA training. We had 32 calls or cases that were unfounded last year. 3 times we declined to take reports because we knew they were false. And when we told people, if we take this report, we're going to arrest you for making a false police report, and they said, we changed our mind. We executed 9 declarations of intent, 75 streetlights were burned out, we reported commission meetings, crime lab evidence pickups, other meetings, mostly because of me, I'm going to all these meetings, uniform equipment. Like I said before, we had 5 vehicle pursuits, 1 foot pursuit. We had a David audit. Gary did vehicle maintenance 51 times. Death notifications for other agencies, there were 2. We cooperated with the FBI, FDLE, and DOC in 1 case. Freedom of information request 2. Background investigations, applicant interviews, tornado watches, crime scene investigations. Provide reports to the insurance companies, firearms qualifications, taser training. The only thing I want to point out here is the complete radio communication failure updates. 8 times during one weekend I went out to find out exactly what was going to happen with the radio tower that failed in the third week of June, third week in June. What happened was, and the best way to explain this, when I first got down here, our radios were terrible. There were a lot of dead spots throughout the city. That was cured when at Patton Park, they put our antenna, our own antenna for CPD, on top of the tower. Each different company or agency has an antenna. That used to be ours. It wasn't there anymore. And the reason what happened was it got struck by lightning. When that happened, that took out all our radio communications for the handheld microphones, radios that we carry on our bodies. I've got one vehicle, and that's one of the guys going up there. What happened was all weekend when they tried to repair this, there were storms in the area. They can only send these people up a certain length of time. If there's storms, they have to come down. This is really strenuous work for these people. It's all OSHA controlled. They had to make numerous trips up that tower to get that repaired. We were without radio communications effectively all weekend, except for my one vehicle. I've got one vehicle that has a trunk-based radio. That's the radio, and that's the radio based in the trunk. That puts out 35 watts. My handheld radio only puts out 5. So when that antenna got struck by lightning, the only way we could communicate with 911 dispatch at the sheriff's office in East Point was in that vehicle. So I just had everybody use that vehicle all weekend. The rest of the stuff is just a lot of administrative things. The only other thing that I want to talk about this is our complete arrest summary, and out of the 60 ones, we have to essentially count what we arrest people for, their sex, race, if they're juveniles, that kind of thing, and what they were essentially arrested for. That's my complete list. I'd rather go down it. The summary of it is simply this. Apprehensions, they're not arrests. That's when an officer stops, arrests, or captures an offender, but the arrest and paperwork is handled by another agency. We made 13 apprehensions in 2014. We arrested 10 people on warrant arrests from other agencies. 1 was for aggravated battery. There was another drug felony offender that was taken in custody after high-speed pursuit who was wanted by the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. And a juvenile was apprehended driving a stolen school bus from Bay County that Deputy Chief Huntings caught. And I stopped another guy that was wanted after FCSO put out a bolo. In summary, we had the 60 in-custody arrests we made ourselves, and out of that, there were 17 felony offenders, 43 misdemeanor offenders, 13 apprehensions made by Carrabelle officers. It included 32 male white offenders, 19 female white offenders, 5 male black offenders, 1 female black offender, 2 male white juveniles, 1 male black juvenile. The other sheets are basically, I keep track of what every officer does. Like with Deputy Chief Huntings, he worked 171 days. He patrolled 12,273 miles. He answered 353 calls. Out of that, 174 were dispatched. 120 were officer initiated. That means he finds something on the street himself It takes action. 59 of them were citizen initiated, where somebody waves them down or calls him without going through 911. He wrote 94 reports, made 11 arrests, 6 were misdemeanor charges, 4 were felony, 1 warrant, 1 juvenile felon was apprehended, 1 juvenile arrest. He made 131 traffic stops, issued 33 tickets. Gasoline expenses for him were $3,433. He took 7.5 comp days or vacation days, 1 sick day used. We don't have a comp time problem in the Carrabelle Police Department. The full report, if you want it, is available. All you gotta do is ask us. Any questions?
I appreciate you putting the report together and bringing it to us, and I want to commend you on your dedicated service to our community. Thank you very much. You set an excellent example for all of us. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, I'm going to take this opportunity to announce that I'm going to retire from Florida law enforcement effective September 30th of this year. Moving on, folks. It's been great, but I'm going to move on and retire at the end of this fiscal year. Now, during this next fiscal year, I'm going to shift most of the administrative work onto Deputy Chief Huntings, and I'm basically going to concentrate on a couple things. One is policy changes. Our present policy was adapted in 2001, and it was copied from a larger agency. A lot of it's not practical. I'm going to write a policy that's more practical to a 5-officer department that we need. I'm going to concentrate on in-service training. I'm going to initiate a formal field training officers program for any new officers. And I'm going to work through this next fiscal budget, which is going to be tough, to prioritize what we need with the limited funds that we probably will have. And we'll work through it. It's been a pleasure serving you, folks. Thank you.
So how many times have you retired?
Well, 2. And I will probably get bored and go back into law enforcement where I'm headed, but we'll see.
Good.
Approval of the attorney bills.
I motion to approve the attorney bills.
We have a motion.
I second that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any?
I motion to adjourn.
No.
You're never